All right, so for the next Mbongi, we have religious rhetoric. And on here, it has confirmation bias, facts, evidence, evidence we ignore, our beliefs, evidence we believe. And then this is actually from one of the previous Mbongis I just did with the little pyramid scheme, self-actualization, desire to become the most that one can be. And then we have self-esteem, love and belonging, safety needs, psychological needs, pretty much Maslow's hierarchy. And then we have some other examples from the previous Mbongis. These are from the two previous Mbongis. Over here we have Y for religious rhetorics. And over here it says religious rhetorics explore the intersection of faith, language, and persuasion. Within religious and spiritual contexts, it examines how rhetorical strategies are used to shape beliefs, community, and influence social behaviors both within and outside religious institutions. By analyzing the ways rhetoric can affirm, challenge, or manipulate faith-based narratives, students will develop a deeper understanding of how religion intersects with culture, ethics, and power. And then over here on the right, we have Mbongi research the following terms. And so the first thing that I'm going to start off with is Gainaim. And for Gainaim, it is according to the U.S. National Park Service, Gainaim meaning except for God symbolizes God's omnipotence through knowledge that people should not fear anything except God. And then this is the site where I got it from. And then next is they are trying to bait you, not debate you. And then here I have, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, a troll is a person who intentionally antagonizes others online by posting inflammatory, irrelevant, or offensive comments. Assessed 12th July 2026. And then this is the source where I got, this is the site where I got my source. And then next we have Salem witch trials. And then here it says, according to the National Endowment for the Humanities, it's 2022, more than 150 women and children were formerly accused of practicing witchcraft. Scaling Laura Wolf, the Salem witch trials, according to the Historical Records Humanities National Endowment for the Humanities, winter 2022. And this is the source where I got it from. This is the site where I got my source. Next is Zora Neale Hurston. Zora Neale Hurston, 1891 to 1960, was an American novelist, folklorist, and anthropologist who was a leading figure of the Harlem Renaissance. She is best known for preserving African-American folklore and for her novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God, 1937. According to the National Women's History Museum, 2017, Hurston broke literacy names by focusing her work on the experience of a Black woman. This highlights her lasting influence on American literature and Black cultural history. And this is the site where I got my source. Next is Dr. Daniel Black. Dr. Daniel Black is an American author, professor, and scholar whose work focuses on African American history, culture, identity, and community. According to Macmillan's Publishers of 2025, Dr. Black aims to provide an example to young Americans of the importance of self-knowledge and communal commitment, and it was a book that I read on him in a previous Mbongi. And then this is the site where I got my source. Next is Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison is, hands keep shaking. Toni Morrison, 1931-2019, was an American novelist, editor, and professor whose works explored African American history, identify family, and the legacy of racism, according to the Nobel Prize Organization 2025. Morrison was honored for novels characterized by visionary force and poetic import. And this is the site where I got my source. Next is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency for the people to seek out, interpret, and remember information that supports their existing beliefs while ignoring, discounting evidence that contradicts them. According to the American Psychological Association, confirmation bias is the tendency to gather evidence that confirms pre-existing expectations, 2023. And this is the site where I got my source. Next is Kaizen method. According to the Corporate Finance Institute, Kaizen is the philosophy of continuous improvement. This approach emphasizes that gradual ongoing improvements can lead to significant long-term results, 2024. And then this is the site where I got my source. Next is the treatment of disabled people by the Christian Church. According to Brock and Switten, the Christian tradition has no single view of disability. The treatment of disabled people by the Christian Church refers to ways Christian communities have responded to people with disabilities throughout history. This is 2012. And then this is the site where I got my source. And then next is hoodoo practices in the Black church. Consider researching how enslaved people hid their African traditions behind Christian practices. Also consider researching the founding of Cog Church. Hoodoo is an African-American folk spiritual tradition that developed during slavery by blending African religious beliefs with elements of Christianity. Enslaved people who practice African tradition privately while expressing them through Christian symbols, prayers, and biblical stories. According to Yonve P. Carrera, 2003, hoodoo was a blending of African and Christian religious traditions. And then this is the site where I got my source. And then next is voodoo practices in the Catholic Church. Consider researching how ancient practices appear in Catholic Church. According to Leslie G. Dismangles, 1992, voodoo is a syncretic religion that combines West African religious traditions and Roman Catholicism. And then here is the site where I got my source. Now, for the next one, we have Asch experiment. The Asch conformity experiment was a series of psychological studies conducted by Solomon Asch in 1951 to examine how social pressure influences people's decision. According to the Simply Psychology 2024, people conform because they want to fit in with the group. And here's the site where I got my source. And then next is Milgram experiment. The Milgram experiment was a series of psychological studies conducted by Stanley Milgram in 1961 to examine how far people would go in obeying authority figures, even when their actions might harm others. According to Simply Psychology, 65% of participants continued to the highest level of the shock generator in 2024. And then this is the site where I got my source for this one. Next is Harvard IAT. According to Project Implicit at Harvard University, the IAT measures attitudes. And then this is the site where I got my source. This is Tituba. No, she was not Native American. According to Elaine G. Breslau, 1996, Tituba was an Indian woman from Barbados. Tituba was an enslaved woman who was one of the first people accused during the Salem witch trials of 1692. And then this is the site where I got my source. Next is Free Will or God's Will. According to the Stanford Encyclopedias of Philosophy, free will is the unique ability of a person to exercise control over their conduct. This highlights the idea that humans have the capacity to make meaningful choices, even as many religious traditions teach that God is sovereign, 2024. And then this is also the site where I got my source. And then the next one is, how does your religion treat other people? Our religion treats others people refers to how a religion tradition views and interacts with those who belong to different religions or belief systems. Different religions and different groups within the same religion have teachings and acceptance and relationships with outsiders. The Pew Research Center major world religions are geographically concentrated. This is the site where I got my source. And the next one is, do you really believe that a supreme God will only write one book, if there is one book? Religious pluralism is the belief or perspective that multiple religions may contain truth or provide valid paths for understanding God or ultimate reality. The question, do you really believe that a supreme God will only write one book, reflects a debate about whether divine truth is found in only one sacred text or across many religion traditions. According to the Harvard Pluralism Project, religious pluralism, the energetic engagement with diversity. And then this is the site where I got my source. And then final one is ethics. A religious institution advertises free food for those who are impoverished, displaced, unhoused, disadvantaged. In order to get this free food, they have to participate in religious service or prayer. Is this ethical? And then the ethics of conditioning food aid on religious participation concern whether it is normally acceptable for a religious organization to require people in need to attend a worship service or prayer in order to get food. This practice supports religious outreach, while others believe humanitarian aid should be provided without a pressure or conditions. The Red Cross and Red Crescent Code of Conduct aid not be used to further particular political or religious standpoint, 1994. And this is where I got my site for my source. One of the instructions is, remember, a simple definition is not research, but is required. And then also draw any models. Just the models for some of the terms that I kind of had a hard time understanding, so I had to kind of do a diagram for. So the next thing on this Mbongi is author introduction, and it is for Moses. So for the start, I have some things summarized. So I'll just, read through this a good bit since this is a lot smaller, and I'll also go over the things that I highlighted and summarized about this. So first thing is author's introduction. First we have Moses was an old man with a beard. He was a great lawgiver. I didn't know what that was, so I went up, did my own little definition of what I thought it was, which is somebody who makes laws or creates laws. He had some trouble with Pharaoh about some plagues and led the children of Israel out of Egypt on the promised land. He died on Mount Nebo, and the angels buried him there. That is a common concept of Moses in the Christian world. And then over here I circled, but there are other concepts as Moses abroad in the world. Asia and all the Near East are sown with legends of this character. They are so numerous and so varied that some students have come to doubt if Moses of the Christian concept is real. Then Africa has her mouth on Moses. And then when I read this, I was like, okay, well, each country has similar, or continent has similar stories about him, as concepts about him and concepts about him. Even there are different, he's relevant all over the continents, because it seemed like every continent knows who he is, but their perspectives on him and their tales and stories on him are different, but the concept is the same. And then all across the continent, there are the legends of the greatness of Moses, but not because of his beard, nor because he brought the laws down from Sinai. No, he is referred because he had the power to go up the mountain and bring them down, meaning he went up the mountain and brought mountains down. Him being able to talk to God on the mountain made him special. And so many men could climb mountains. Anyone could bring down laws that had been handed to them. But who can talk with God face to face? Who had the power to command God to go to a peak of a mountain? And there demand of him laws with which to govern a nation. What other man has ever seen with his eyes, even the back part of God's glory? Who else has ever commanded the wind and the hail, the light and the darkness? So he pretty much has the ability to talk to God on a mountain and command laws, which is in stories, no other human being could do that but him. So with that kind of made him special. Let me move on to the next page. And then over here we have, so we're gonna read this part. The calls for power, and that is what Africa sees in Moses to worship, for he is worshipped as a god. Now, when he went up that mountain and he went up and talked to God and made laws, I did say, but who documented it though? Because, some people might not believe it, or is this really true? Did this really happen? This is just a question I had. And then I circled only because he did something no one else does. And with that ability for him to talk to God on a mountain and create laws, or just, command things, or bring down mountains like they said in the previous page. Since that made him so special, they looked at him as a god. And then for another perspective, for another country, in Haiti, the highest god in the Haitian pantheon is Dambala Okwara Tokan Freda Duomi, and he is identified as Moses. And then I put before he was a bearded man, but in the Haitian culture, he is a snake god. And they're going to go more into it because apparently he is the serpent god. The serpent god. But notice how in every single story about him from different cultures, it's a different tale about him, or a different appearance about him. It's not the same as, the origin from the culture, the origin of his story, of what culture is from. And then but this deity did not originate in Haiti. His home is in Dahomey and is worshipped there extensively. Moses had his rod of power. In the original origin story, he had a rod like a staff of power, which was a living serpent. And I circled rod, staff in other stories, but a snake in this one. And then I've said, so in every temple of Damala, there is a living snake, or the symbol. And this worship of Moses has the greatest one of magic, is not confined to Africa, wherever the children of Africa have been scattered by slavery. There is an acceptance of Moses as Negroes in America. There are countless people of other races depending upon mystic symbols and seals and syllables said to have been used by Moses to work with his wonders. There are millions of copies of certain book, the 6th and 7th book of Moses, being read and consulted in secret because the readers believe in Moses. Some even maintain that stories of the miracles of Jesus are but Messiah legends told again. And then I put, it seems like it's multiple stories about Moses, but they're all different in their own way, which is what I said earlier. And then I said, nobody can tell how many tales and legends of Moses are alive in the world, nor how far they have traveled. So many have collected around his name. So all across Africa, America, the West Indies, there are tales of the power of Moses and great worship of him and his powers. But it does not flow from the 10 Commandments. It is his rod of power, the terror he showed before all Israel and to Pharaoh, that mighty hand. And then I summarized this whole little paragraph, and I said, it seems that different countries and different cultures all show diverse tales and interpretations of his story in religious text. And then I circled over here on the right, I said, very similar to how multiple religions believe in God, but it's not the same God. Like Christians believe in God, right? have Allah for Islam. You have Hinduism for Braha and Vishnu, which are two spirits, not necessarily like gods, but spirits. And then it's a similar concept, but just different beings and different tales, different stories, different beliefs. But it's in every single, a majority of religions worship some type of higher power or some type of God in a way. This will be the final page for this Mbangi. Forehead by Deborah McDonald. The Real Thing, warm, humorous, poetic, New Yorker. In 1993, novel based on familiar story of how the Exodus, Zora Neale Hurston, which this was actually from the research assignment on this Mbangi that I just showed, and I actually did get some things from here too. The Old Testament with Moses, a black folklore song to create a compelling allegory of power, redemption, and faith, narrated in a mixture of biblical rhetoric, black dialect, and Quinicular English. Hurston traces Moses' life from the day he is launched into the Nile River and a reed basket to his development as a great magician and to his transformation into the heroic rebel leader, the great emancipator, from his dramatic confrontations with Pharaoh to his fragile negotiations with the wary Hebrews. This very human story is told with great humor, passion, and psychological insight, the hallmarks of Hurston as a writer and champion of black culture. Zora Neale Hurston, 1891-1960, was a novelist, folklorist, and anthropologist whose fictional and factual accounts of black heritage are unparalleled. She is the author of many books, including Their Eyes Were Watching, God, Dust Tracks on a Road, Tell My Horse, and Mules and Men. Series editor Henry Louis Gates Jr., which is the same guy from the previous story. But and then here we have Moses, the Man on the Mountain. So all in all, this just kind of opens my eyes to, because I didn't know, and I actually learned something new in reading this. I didn't know that Moses, the story of Moses, I thought this story was only told in Christianity, but it's actually told in different cultures, different continents, the different countries, and it's also told in different ways. I did not know that, so this is something that is very, very new to me, and it just kind of opened my eyes to a lot of my perspective changed on just this story alone, because I thought this story only existed in Christianity. Well, not just Christianity, but just my culture as a whole.